horrible decisions in our lifetime. And if you haven't made a horrible decision,
You haven't
don't
made
know.
very many decisions.
I don't know what kind of creature you are. like that's how we learn.
And welcome to the By Reason of Insanity podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Devin.
My thinking is there's something that we do all the time, and we do it. We've talked about this to a degree. We have to make choices and decisions on a daily basis. Some are very mundane. Some are life-altering potentially. So I guess my question for you today is this. How and what governs our choices?
You know, my first thought is emotion. I think emotion governs a lot of our choices, given that the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is the logic and decision-making part of our brain, is the most recent to develop. And there's no real connection between the two parts of the brain that are emotion and logic. And so the most powerful part of our brain is the emotional part. And so I think a lot of our decision-making is on an emotional basis. Do you make more logic-based decisions or emotion-based decisions?
Personally, I tend to play towards logic. I tend to look at the overall picture and say, okay, fine, if 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, that's not a good choice.
Yeah.
So,
but sometimes you just got like that feeling.
Yeah, there is that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or that it's just kind of like, man, is this the right? Logically, it may make all the sense in the world, but there's still that nagging space that says, is this the right decision?
But there's also different, like, I'm just thinking back to something you told me a while ago now, and it's making me think about like the different personalities in decision making. And so something that you enjoy and you like doing, and that you do, you jump feet first into it.
Yes.
You've said that, right?
Yes.
So that can't entirely be a logic-based decision. That's definitely, even if you don't consciously know it, subconsciously there's an emotional decision going on there. That
okay. Listen,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, I may think through it on a very basic level. Like, okay, well, hey, this has potential, to do or be whatever. But if it's something I'm behind, I tend to.
But the baseline is, wow, I really want to do this, and wanting to do this is an emotion that is you like want or yeah. That's an emotional response.
Well, okay, the desire, that's supposed the desire to do something.
That's based on emotion.
Yeah, I guess that is. I really wasn't thinking in those terms of decisions. I was thinking more in terms of
No, I agree, but I think so. There's like, if we section it into like big life decisions and the micro decisions we make every day. I think we talked about this a little bit in a previous podcast.
We did.
That we make like, oh God, I didn't even want to say the number wrong, but it's like thousands of decisions a day, whether or not we realize it. Like the simplest of them is whether we get out of bed in the morning, and if we make our bed or don't make our bed. Those are all decisions we're making. And I think a lot of those decisions are made emotionally. Like, the question I think we ask ourselves a lot is, do I feel like doing that? And literally that is just the way that comes out is, do I feel like doing that?
Right.
And that in itself shows the amount of emotion that is put into our decisions.
Well, okay, but I mean, on the same side of that, even looking at the current decisions I'm having to make, I don't feel
right
like I want to do any of these things, to
right.
be totally honest. There's no feeling of, oh, I so much want to do this. But there is the financial backside of it. It's like, all right, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm good at it. I've done it for years and years and years.
That's the difference in between, like, I know, like, if some of you have heard of like Tony Robbins, I'm sure you've heard of him, or like these motivational speakers, and successful people in general, they'll often tell you, or like people will ask them, where do you get all the motivation to do this? And they're like, I'll tell you what, half the time I have no motivation to do it, but I get my ass up and do it anyway. I don't feel like doing it, but I do it. And so that's where that line crosses over from, emotional. You have that emotional response in what you want to do, but you counteract it. You say, be damned with that emotion. I'm going to do this because it needs done, or I'm going to do this because it's an end to a means that I want. We all have this story that we tell ourselves, the pity story of why this happened and why I'm not this, and why that didn't happen. And the more we tell ourselves that story and share that story to others, the more we reinforce that story. And, chances are 99% of the time that story, however, you view it, is not
It's
reality
not
of
accurate.
it. Yeah. And we have the worst self-perceptions of ourselves in our own
Without a doubt.
mind.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I'm my own worst enemy.
Yeah, and that's
absolutely.
I think that's true in most cases. But to overcome that, I mean, I'm just thinking like right now of like Navy SEALs. So you have to like reach a point where what they do in their training is like they literally break them.
Yes.
And push them so hard that they literally break their mind, break their body. And once you get to that point and then they keep pushing you, you realize, wow, I am capable way more than I thought mentally and physically.
Correct.
It was literally a limit set by myself that has barred me.
Yeah, they talk actually where Navy SEALs are concerned, they talk about when you've reached your point of what you think is breaking, that the science at least has proven that you can go 6 to 7 times beyond that.
Yeah.
That you're physically, humanly capable of going 6 to 7 times beyond what you thought you were capable of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but what does that say about our decision making though? Does that mean we're making our decisions based on what we think we're capable of, or what we're actually capable of?
What we think we're capable of, 100%. Yeah.
But what if I think I'm capable of, anything? I mean, what if I think there's nothing that's impossible?
Well, I mean, look at what we tell our kids. Oh, you could be anything you want. You
True.
could be the president of the United States. You could be an astronaut. You could be this or that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you work for Elon Musk, you could be an astronaut these days.
And the reality is that in most cases, that could be true, but we do limit ourselves, I think. And I think we do limit ourselves in our decision-making as well. I mean, like, for example, I think just recently there's been, I forget what they're calling it. They have a name for it, but like basically the mass exodus of the job market for people that are not like staying with their existing employer because they want to go out and find new opportunities. Because on average, like you might get like a regular inflationary raise every year, but you're not making more money from the majority of people. But
Correct.
On average, if you're in like a business industry and you leave one place and go to another, on average right now, you're getting 25% more than you would at your
Well,
previous
and that's
employer.
because the industry is so desperate for people who are willing to work.
Yeah.
Never mind whether they're trained to work, but I mean,
Right.
that they're just willing to work.
But I think that's I'm talking that in relation to decision making. Like in the past, people would make the decision to stay with an employer because, before loyalty
Right.
was a
tenure, benefits,
Yeah.
pension.
and company loyalty was a big thing. But
right.
as that went on, you saw companies being less and less loyal to their employees, but expecting loyalty from their employees
And wanting and requiring more from them.
Yeah, exactly. And so
The Great Resignation is
Yes.
what I've heard it called.
yes, that's the term I was looking for. And I think that is a good step in the decision making of the employees in this country to because what they're realizing is they're realizing their value. And if you're valued more somewhere else, you should pursue that.
Huh. That's an interesting thought. And you know what? I mean, there's a lot of truth in that. It's like even whenever with my company, my drivers were paid the way they were paid because of their value.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to teach some of them that they were valuable because they were so programmed by a system that limited what they believed their value was.
Mm-hmm.
They literally had to be retrained to understand that what they did was of absolute value
Right.
and to learn what that value was in and of themselves. So, yeah, I guess there's a lot. So, I mean, that brings in a whole other thought in decision making then. I mean, we could really sit back now. I mean, so how much has societary programming affected the way people think and make decisions now?
Right. And that's why I said that example of, what do we tell our kids when they're growing up? We tell them they could be anything that they want. But
Correct.
then the world's not telling them that.
No, the world's telling them there's something less.
Yeah. And they're telling them, if you're a female, you can't be anything but a nurse or a teacher. And if you're a male, you can't be anything but, a businessman or whatever, or a doctor. And those set expectations for gender roles. And I think that's wrong in itself. But on a larger scale, we're telling kids they can be anything they want. And then they're going out in the world and finding out, well, there's obstacles to that.
But a lot of the same teaching that they're being told as well, not from the parents generally speaking, but from society, is that they deserve to be at the top right from the beginning.
Yeah.
That their time in school and their little time in college means they should automatically be at the top of the ladder instead of having to work from the bottom up like the rest of the world has had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth and mommy and daddy, are old money that own a multi-billion-dollar corporation and say, here you go, the average person who becomes a millionaire does not do it or becomes financially successful or business successful, doesn't do it day one out of college.
Right. Yeah, it takes hard work and discipline and not making decisions based on emotion. Because if you make the decisions based on emotion, I didn't feel like getting out of bed today. I was tired as shit.
No, you didn't.
But here I am. We're recording a podcast.
Here you are.
I got some work done before we started, and I'm going to work the rest of the day too. And
but look what you're achieving now.
Yeah. Yep. I know what I'm doing because I'm one of those people that, I have a strong sense of motivation, but I also
have a strong sense of wanting to stay in bed.
Yes, exactly.
I know whenever I send a text and I don't see a text back for like 2 hours, especially in the morning, it's like, yeah, he's still in bed.
Yeah. Yeah, but I get my shit done is the point.
You do get it done. You just have a different schedule for doing it.
Yeah.
Than the average 9 to 5, so to speak.
Right. I don't think there's a problem with that. And
there's no problem with that as long as the people that you're dealing with don't mind working within that schedule or that time frame.
Right. And obviously that's the thing is like, as a society, I think we're making a decision that, the 9 to 5 doesn't fit our model anymore. And you see that it was exacerbated by COVID. I mean, the work from home model. I mean, I'm of the opinion as long as you get your work done and
who cares when you do it?
It's delivered on time when it needs to be. I don't care if you sleep all day and then work all night and get it done. As long as it's not stuff that you have to be interacting with people on a regular schedule like the rest of the world.
It is not it is not the way I grew up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Or you have to sit your butt in the office chair from 9 to 5 whether you're getting your work done or not. I think the decision making is a skill that is built up over time. We're taught from a very young age, to make good choices and good decisions.
That's what I tell my son all the time. Make good choices.
Yeah, exactly. And so decision making isn't something that just happens naturally. Decision making is something that builds and you should be building and improving upon your whole life. As you can pull in more resources and external information, the more you can do that, the more of that you do, the better decisions you're going to make. I was talking to someone, my cousin, the other day, and he said that he recently got let go from a place, and he was really upset about it, and he was gonna fire back a message and say, this is BS and all that, and he was like, he said he sat back and was like, wait a minute, that's an emotional decision, that's an emotional response, and he sat
I've
back.
had a few of those lately.
He said, I'm going to cool off. I'm going to give myself 2 days, cool off. And he didn't end up saying anything. And we all make horrible decisions in our lifetime. And if you haven't made a horrible decision,
you haven't made very many decisions.
I don't know what kind of creature you are. like that's how we learn. Like I said with the kids example, you put your hand on a hot stove one time, you're going to learn that wasn't a good decision.
Oh, and you're going to learn it even quicker whenever you're going to understand why your parents said you shouldn't do that.
Right, exactly. And so I think this decision making is learned personally, and I think that's the most powerful way of learning it. But I think you can also learn from others. Like in business, I'm a huge resource guy. I take in information all day, every day, and the more I can learn from other people's bad decisions, it can save me from making my own bad decisions. Yeah, exactly. Making the same mistake. And so I think the more you're exposed to more you're exposed to information and people that are in a similar situation to you, and you observe their life and their decisions, the better place you're in to, calculate that and make your own decisions based upon previous experience. I mean, think about all the information that's out there in the world, and all the personal memoirs and books and biographies that people have either written about themselves, autobiographies or biographies, and like there is not a single decision that has been made on Earth or that you can make on Earth that hasn't already been made by someone.
However, it does not necessarily, so saying that does not necessarily mean because that decision played out the way it did for that person, that it's going to the same for you.
Right. No, that's not what I'm insinuating, but I'm saying you could at least
understand an avenue that it could go.
Yeah, and take that into consideration.
I see, said the blind man.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What do we do? I don't know, but I know that the decisions that I'm having to make right now are not ones that I'm real happy about.
Yeah, and I think
they're very uncomfortable.
We're often put in circumstances that we have to make decisions that we don't want to. And I think that's just the nature of life, that we're required to do things we don't want and required to make decisions that we don't want to make.
Well, I don't know that we're required to.
Well,
I mean, we may have to make choices, but I don't know that there's a requirement that we have to.
That's the other thing about decision making too, is
you can just abstain.
You could be indecisive. In our leadership group, we had this presenter come in, and she was like, how many people are comfortable with confrontation? And she made us if you're this comfortable, stand here. If you're not comfortable, you'd do something, you would say something but not confront them directly, stand here. Or if you're not comfortable with confrontation at all, stand on the edge of the room.
Okay.
And there was only, I think, 3 or 4 people out of 16 of us that stood right in the center and said, I'm gonna deal with whatever is coming at me.
Right.
The others were like, yeah, nah.
I'm good. I don't need to deal with that. Yeah,
exactly.
Me, I'd have been standing in the middle of things like, excuse me?
In college, I took a bunch of classes on decision making, and public policy decision making, international policy.
Ethics.
Ethical decision making. And I did a report for a class called presidential decision making. And we compared George W. Bush's decision making to Obama's decision making in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and it wasn't just whether they said yes or no or did this or that. It was the structure they set up around themselves to enable them to make good decisions. So the advisors they had, the internal communication that they had, the documentation processes that they kept. It was a very in-depth analysis of the decision-making process and how they got to where they got. And I think that time and time and again, the important part of decision making is the people that you surround yourself, the resources you have access to, and how much you consider them and listen to them. Like in the groupthink we were talking about, you can have access to all the information you want, but if you aren't open to the opinion or differing opinions, your decision making ability is entirely limited by your own belief.
No, I guess that's true, and I guess that's one of the reasons that I kind of am as outgoing as I am, and one of the reasons that I try to have many associates that I trust or that I can rely on to some degree, just as sounding boards. With that, everybody, we're going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you for everyone who has been tuning into the podcast. We definitely appreciate it. And we look forward to chatting with y'all here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening.
All right, y'all. Peace.